Anthony specializes in police brutality cases. Recently, he was the lead attorney for the Diallo family. As you may recall, Amadou Diallo was an unarmed black man who was gunned down by New York City police officers. Anthony has lectured at many schools, and today he joins us to talk about this case. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you.
We have seen inconsistencies in the testimony of lay witnesses. We have seen inconsistencies in the testimony of police witnesses. My question to you is, do you think the jury will judge all of the witnesses the same way, or will they look at the police witnesses a little differently?
Well, I think they'll take each witness individually and based upon the credibility of any given particular witness and the common sense their stories make. One thing I would like to point out is, and I haven't had the opportunity, unfortunately, to follow the case in great detail, although I've read extensively about it. The primary duty of every police officer in any police force, in any urban setting, is their primary goal is to preserve human life. That is not what happened in this case. The exact opposite happened. Deadly physical force is only to be used by police officers as a last resort in order to protect themselves, other officers, or innocent persons. That is not the situation that happened here.
Well, here Officer Krupinski argues that he shot to protect Officer Hunt, so that would be to preserve human life.
Well, let me say this. I happen to have brought with me, and I don't know if you can see it, a rake. It's not loaded, so don't get nervous, and I don't know if you can see it, but it is fairly identical to the rake that Mr. Shaw had at the time that he was shot twice and fatally by Officer Krupinski from 12 to 15 feet away. So certainly Mr. Shaw presented absolutely no threat to him. As to Officer Hunt, there is no reason that Officer Hunt and the three other officers could not have, short of using physical deadly force, disarmed this man.
How?
This is a rake.
I understand that, sir, but that's the key question, is how. They had pepper spray. They had, at least one of them had a metal flashlight. Are you saying they should have swarmed him? They should have tackled him? They should have beat him over the head? I mean, what specifically are you saying?
I'm saying that first of all, you're dealing with what's called an EDP, an emotionally disturbed person. Any police guidelines will tell you that you're supposed to have a line of cover, a zone of safety. In this situation, I would say at least 20 feet. As the perpetrator is advancing, you try and maintain that. In the event you can't, yes, I would say you certainly don't shoot him and kill him if the alternative is to be able to grab him and subdue him and protect his life, because we must remember the primary goal of any police officer is to preserve life, not to take life.
And I just want to remind the viewers, and then before James gets his question in, that this is not the exact rake, of course, in the trial. It does look similar to me. At least the color is a little bit different, but I just want our viewers to be aware this is not exactly the same rake as in the trial.
Very similar, though.
Right, and it looks similar to me. This is James Curtis, Mr. Gair. Thank you so much for joining us. You talk about this idea of police officers' primary goal being to preserve life. Where exactly does that come from? In looking in the Code of Ethics, it talks about their duties, but doesn't spell it out quite that clearly. Is this a general rule that you're speaking of?
I would venture to say that it is in every patrol guide, in every urban police department. And let me just say this. I have in front of me a copy of the patrol guide for the New York City Police Department. It says, the primary duty of all members of the service is to preserve human life. I have a copy of the regulations of the Detroit Police Department, and it says basically the same thing. And any police expert who would come on your show will agree with that is what the police are there to do.
Certainly,
they are not there to declare war on minority communities and use deadly physical force as a first resort, but as a last resort.
Certainly, Mr. Gair, there are allegations in this case and surrounding this entire issue of the Detroit police officers that there was no other resort other than the deadly force short of mace, keeping in mind that Detroit police officers do not have batons, they do not have the beanbag guns, they do not have other methods of less than lethal force. Is that totally irrelevant, or does that play some role in this particular outcome?
No, it plays absolutely no role.
Why not?
I'll tell you why. And I'm not a trained police officer, although I certainly have a lot of training in self-defense as a youngster in martial arts, boxing, and the like. If someone is going to raise a rake like this at me, and I'm a trained police officer, and if I have to, under those circumstances, close the distance, I am going to be able to, as a trained officer, prevent myself from being subjected to deadly physical force.
Okay, but Mr. Gair, I too am trained in martial arts, and I understand what you're saying about you have a long weapon, you go in and close the distance. That is true. But when you're doing that, you are taking a risk that that weapon is not going to hit you. One of our viewers sent me an email that said, let's do a demonstration. Take a melon, put it on a table, bang it with a rake, and see what happens. And I guarantee you, if that rake, if you misjudged as you're going in to protect yourself, if you misjudge and that rake hits you in the head, hits you in the neck, or hits you in the back, you are looking at some serious bodily injury.
If we were going to follow your argument to its logical conclusion, then we may as well change the whole premise of every statement in every patrol guide that the primary goal of a police officer is to protect human life.
But what about the human life of the other officers? Does that count for nothing?
Of course it doesn't count for nothing. But what I'm saying to you is that Officer Krupinski did not have to use deadly physical force to protect this other officer's life.
Mr. Gair, let's change focus for just a second. In this case, we've seen prosecution witness after prosecution witness, speaking of the family members, have trouble with regard to inconsistencies in prior testimony, so much so that there was an implication during the trial that conversations with the civil attorney who's representing the family in what will likely be a civil lawsuit may have caused confusion among these family members. Can you comment on that?
Well, you know, I don't know the details of that. I, of course, know, and I assume you're talking about Jeffrey Feiger, who
yes, he is the civil attorney who's representing the family.
Who has an excellent reputation.
He's a fantastic attorney.
In Michigan as a great trial lawyer. I cannot, quite frankly, comment on anything he may have said because I don't know what he said. I know him by reputation, and it's a reputation that's respected throughout the country.
Well, certainly, and I'm certainly not implying anything about Mr. Feiger that was untoward or disreputable or even unethical. My point simply is this, and my question is this: is it conceivable in a situation where a civil attorney latches onto a case before the criminal proceeding is through, in the midst of a trial, before a trial, having the family hold press conferences, make other statements? Can that cause a problem, in your opinion?
It has the potential to do that. Can I go on to one other subject here?
You can. We just have a few seconds left, and then we have another guest we need to go to. So
Very
if you could
quickly,
wrap it up briefly, we appreciate it.
I will do it with you in 10 seconds. There's another aspect of this case, and that is the pattern and practice of grossly excessive force used by the Detroit Police Department. This Officer Krupinski, was arrested for using racial epithets and threatening to shoot someone off duty. Okay.
Okay, well,
and in fact, he wasn't prosecuted for that.
That's right. He was not prosecuted, and as I understand it, he was arrested for the racial insults and attacks. I don't know about pulling a gun, but you're right, he was not prosecuted. It's an issue that sort of remains out there unresolved. I'm going to have to say goodbye to you and let you go, and thank you for being with us today, sir.
My pleasure.
Thank you.